everybody, welcome to another video. I know it's been like ages. Fox is now 5 months. We're heading into Christmas. This time last year things looked very different for us and we were going through a totally different set of circumstances. But I thought I would really try and just take the opportunity to vlog and do the second part of what happened after Fox was born. Compared to what some parents go through with their babies is like nothing, it's a drop in the ocean, but for us at the time it felt really, really huge, and my heart really goes out to all those parents who have had babies in the NICU for an extended period of time. After he was born, he was given a little bit of help breathing. I don't know whether he was then taken to the NICU because of that, or whether he had, because they knew that there was a potential for him to have some difficulties on being born. I don't know whether he would have been taken to the NICU anyway. So skin to skin was not an option. He was brought down to us in recovery when it was decided that he was stable enough, and we had at least an hour, I'd say, with him. It's hard to recollect how much time we actually spent, but I think he had his first feed. He latched really well as far as I was concerned, and then he slept for a long time. It wasn't until eventually at about 2 a.m, 3 a.m. in the morning that we all got a room together on the postnatal ward, and that was one of the most uncomfortable nights of my life. It was so hot. We were experiencing a heat wave that we hadn't had anything like since the 70s, and John was sharing the bed with me because there was no spare bed, and every time Fox made a noise we were super jumpy and twitchy because I think we were kind of just expecting that something would be wrong. I do remember at one point that I fed him and he spit up kind of like clear mucousy fluid, which is to be expected in a C-section baby because he didn't have that nice squeeze that babies get on the way out to clear his lungs. And he had a few episodes like that, and they continued well into the next day. During the morning though, at about 7, I think John left and it was just Fox and I for a while and things were fine. He had a pediatric review at 11 a.m. and he was fine. He passed with flying colours. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. Getting on for lunchtime, I felt like it was probably about time that he should wake up and feed, and it was during this time that I noticed he was quite lethargic and I couldn't actually get him to stir for a feed. So it's lunchtime and this little guy is determined to sleep. He's been a little bit sicky. He's bringing up a lot of mucus, and that's partly because he's a C-section baby, which was not concerning but a little unusual, I suppose. He spit up a few more times, mostly just clear mucousy fluid, and then one time he threw up. It was green, and he did not like that at all because obviously it was quite acidic and it wasn't very nice, and I remember it came out his nose and everything. So he'd made his sheets in his cot dirty, so I picked him up and I put him on a towel on my bed, and I asked a nurse to change his cot sheets, but I kept him on the towel for quite a while. I just kept trying to wake him. I was playing with him, I was tickling his feet and stuff like that. It was really warm. He was breathing quite rapidly, but I just thought babies do breathe quite rapidly. My doula arrived and she tried to stir him as well, decided that yes, he seemed a bit sluggish, so maybe what would be a good idea would be to thaw some of the colostrum that I had harvested and give him that to see if it would perk him up and give him some more blood sugar to work with, and maybe he'd be more likely to feed then. That didn't really work. John and his sister Katie arrived around this time. We tried skin to skin contact with Daddy. We tried completely stripping him off so he had nothing on. There were so many people around that I decided to finally go and take a shower. I felt so gross at this point because I hadn't showered since, I don't know, like the Sunday, and it was now Tuesday and it was really hot and I'd been through labour and everything, and so I went and I had a shower. When I came back, Fox really hadn't improved at all. He'd spit up a lot more. It was just at the time it was much more yellowy because of the colostrum. This towel that was covered in vomit basically, and with like yellow and one green patch. So I decided that something was up. This wasn't right, so I decided to go and get a nurse, and she looked him over and she said, yeah, he is breathing a little rapidly. She checked it with like a little monitor and everything, but she said, but he seems okay, you know, it's quite normal for babies to split up a lot, you know, you just have to keep trying. She was like, so these are all vomit, and what about this green one, is that poo? And I said, no, that's vomit. And as soon as I said that, her face changed and I knew something was up. She decided that she would quite like to get the paediatrician to have another look at him. And John and Charlotte, my doula, and Fox all went down to paediatrics. Shortly before Fox was taken away, actually Leo arrived with my mum. He'd been staying with her, and he got to meet his brother for the first time. But it was a bit odd because of the situation, because we were worried about Fox and there were so many other people around, and I think Leo, being out of his own environment, didn't really feel that confident. He was a bit quiet, a bit subdued, kind of didn't want to get too close to the baby. But fortunately that completely changed eventually. I elected to stay behind. I wanted to spend some time with Leo and make sure that he didn't feel like he was left out, so I stayed with my mum and Leo in the room while Fox was taken away. But it didn't take long for Charlotte to return and say that it was quite important that I came and had a chat with the paediatrician, because there was a concern about Fox. And at this moment it felt really, really super scary, because it just felt like it was all too good to be true. This baby that was supposed to be compromised at birth was totally fine and doing well, and then it all just started to feel like it was coming crashing down, and I didn't know what to expect. When we were in with the paediatrician and they had him on one of those special baby table things, they said they weren't sure what was wrong. They thought it could be an infection that he'd picked up somewhere, or that it could be he had a bowel obstruction which was causing the green vomit. So they wanted to readmit him to the NICU and run some observations and, you know, give him antibiotics and stuff. They also needed to get a blood sample from him, and this meant that he was going to need a cannula. And they told us that it's probably best if we left the room while they did this, because obviously it's not going to be particularly pleasant for Fox. After much umming and ahhing, because they gave us the option to stay or to go, we did leave him. And that was really hard, because I guess my maternal instincts were saying, don't leave your baby really needs you. And I knew that he was going to be distressed and he wasn't going to have me around. Even thinking about it right now makes me feel a bit funny. So then it was just a case of waiting while they figured out what to do and what was wrong. We waited, I'm not really sure how long we waited. I think I went back to the room at some point. Mum and Leo had left by then. They left while we were down in the paediatrics, because basically my mum was like, I can see that you're probably not going to come back up with a baby. We should just make ourselves scarce and get out of your way, which is what they did. I remember Charlotte just running around my room, tidying up, making things look nice again, because things had kind of got a bit messy over the last few days, and I was just sat there not really knowing what to do with myself. The most pressing concern that I had besides Fox at that point was the breastfeeding. I didn't want my milk to suffer as a result of being detached from Fox. So I started expressing using the hospital pump, which was really good. I did that every sort of 3 hours, and John would very dutifully run down to the sterilizer and sterilize all the equipment and bring it back, and I'd put all the stuff that I expressed in the freezer. Eventually we got to see him, and it was going into NICU was really emotional. He was in an incubator, and he had all these monitors going on. He had little cathodes on his chest, and he had a cannula in his foot, I think. We couldn't get him out to hold him at that time. They wanted to keep him in there. And he was still breathing very rapidly, but what they had confirmed for us is that his lungs weren't compromised. They were doing everything that they should be normally, and his oxygen rate was actually really fine, and so was his carbon dioxide levels. They were totally fine. He was just breathing rapidly. They had him on a fluid drip, they had him on antibiotics, and it was really hard to walk away and leave him there. Even though this was 5 months ago and we've been totally fine since, I haven't really revisited it like this, and it's bringing a lot of stuff back.
Hey buddy, you seem much better. You've not got your crazy breathing tummy on anymore. Your eyebrows are far and full. Sleepy guy.
Everything beyond this point gets a little hazy. I have got raw vlogs that I shot. The other thing that they were worried about was a bowel obstruction. So what they needed to do was to give him a barium swallow test, which is basically where they get you to ingest a radioactive isotope, which is completely harmless. It's not radioactive, it's just something that will show up on an x-ray. And they would be able to see like its trail through his body and determine whether it was getting held up somewhere. Because sometimes the bowels can have like kinks or twists in them, which can make it really difficult for things to get through, and then surgery is required to actually correct it. They weren't sure if they were going to do that evening. They said that if it was urgent, they would have to transfer him to Oxford. Fortunately, they decided it was not urgent, so he could have the barium test the next day and he could just go across the road to the general hospital to have that done. And all the while, I'm dealing with a post-operative wound and just like pain medication and post-operative wind as well, which was really painful. And I hadn't had that the first time with Leo. I don't really know why, but I did not have it. It was super painful and I could not get comfortable. So didn't sleep a lot. We continued to ask for regular updates. He was nil by mouth, so he still wasn't breastfeeding, and that probably really didn't help. Barium test came up negative, so no bowel obstruction. That was the biggest concern that they had, and that was a negative, so that was good. He continued to be on antibiotics for a couple of days, but eventually, he just kind of got better, and maybe like the day after he'd been in the incubator, we were allowed to get him out. I was allowed to try feeding him. I was very tired though, and I'd often feel really sleepy while I was feeding him, so for safety reasons I wasn't allowed to continue holding him when I felt really tired. And slowly but surely, over what felt like forever but was only a couple of days, monitors got switched off, cathodes came off. He was in a cot, not an incubator anymore, which meant that we had to dress him. And I could start feeding him again. And then I think the last day they were talking about admitting him to the postnatal ward. He took his own cannula out by mistake. He kind of kicked, I don't know, I guess he must have caught it somehow and just pulled it out. Eventually he was readmitted to the postnatal ward, and I was allowed to have him with me on the Thursday night. Thursday night was the first night that I had with him by myself. I was a little bit nervous about that because nights always feel so lonely, and we had such a difficult time. He slept until about 1 a.m. I was concerned that he was sleeping so long because of what had happened last time, and I couldn't get him to wake. So I asked the midwives what to do, and they said, well, get him out, strip him down, feed him. But I could not get him to feed. He was crying, he was arching his back, he wouldn't latch. We were both really frustrated, really tired. I was sitting in this uncomfortable chair, and I asked a midwife for help. And she came and she showed me how to sit in bed and feed. And that worked for a while. In the end, the only way we got any sleep was if he lay on my chest, and we laid like that for a long time. Until the morning. Sometime on Friday he had a pediatric review and he was cleared, and they talked about going home. And his blood cultures for, seeing if he had an infection brought back nothing. They were negative. So what we think happened is that he just became very dehydrated. Being born on one of the hottest days of the year is super traumatic, and babies lose fluids so quickly. My heart really goes out to the parents whose babies are in the NICU for an extended period of time. We had only 2 days, and we were told by one of the doctors that our baby was the most well baby in the room. We know that some of the babies in that NICU, in that nursery, were receiving end-of-life care, and that they were never going to get to be brought home by their mums and dads, which is just heartbreaking. These little tiny helpless souls who are just trying to get through the day, you know, the next hour maybe. It's totally heartbreaking, and it makes you truly grateful when things are easy for you, because you have no idea what other people might be going through. Anyway, that is basically everything that happened, and since then we've been totally fine, no issues. Next year I'm going to try and put more content out, maybe get YouTube back up and running again, because I've neglected it a lot over the last few months, but I did have a baby, so I have a good excuse. Alright then, I'll be back with another video really soon. Bye guys! So we made it home, we escaped. Just like I hoped we would today. Yeah, this feels really kind of surreal. He's finally here, and I get to use all the bits and pieces that I've been looking out for months.